It was the kind of morning where silence felt like thunder. The skyline of Manhattan shimmered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Lumina headquarters, but inside the top-floor executive office, the air was still thick with tension, unspoken frustration, and a kind of desperation no business degree could ever teach you how to survive. Ethan Carter, CEO of one of New York's last-standing luxury fashion houses, stood alone. Jacket off, sleeves rolled up, jaw clenched. He didn't look like a man in charge. He looked like a man cornered by fate, by failure, and by a promise he couldn't keep. What do you do when everything you've spent your life building is about to be taken from you? Not because you weren't good enough, but because someone else decided you weren't stable enough? That you weren't married enough? It sounds absurd, doesn't it? But that's what Ethan was facing. A merger with Takeda International, one that could resurrect Lumina from the ashes, was hanging by a thread. And that thread was stitched into a lie. That Ethan was a man engaged to be married. That he was ready to settle down, start a family, become the kind of partner Haruto Takeda, Japan's most elusive, tradition-bound billionaire, would trust. But the truth was uglier than any business scandal. 2 weeks ago, Ethan caught his fiancée in bed with someone else. The betrayal hadn't just gutted him emotionally, it shattered the illusion that had taken months to craft. One text message, one photo, and the entire fairytale collapsed. He hadn't told anyone, not his board, not the press. Not even Haruto Takeda, who would be arriving in New York that very night with his wife and children, expecting to be greeted by Ethan and his smiling bride-to-be. It was all a lie, and lies don't last long in this town. Ryan Miller, Ethan's best friend and the company's irreverent deputy director, was lounging on the leather couch like none of it mattered. His long legs dangled over the armrest as he scrolled through his phone, smirking at some probably inappropriate message. "You think this is funny?" Ethan asked quietly, barely looking at him. Ryan didn't look up. "I think it's tragic. But also, a little funny. You've spent the past 3 hours spiraling instead of solving." "I have solved it," Ethan said, grabbing a pen and hurling it across the room. It hit Ryan square in the forehead. Ryan sat up, half annoyed, half impressed. "Is this where you propose a desperate, illogical, movie-level solution that will backfire spectacularly?" Ethan stared at the door. "I'm going to marry the first woman who walks through the door," he said, voice low but certain. "Whoever she is, whatever she looks like, if she can fake stability for 2 weeks, I'll make her my fiancée." Ryan blinked. "You're joking." But Ethan wasn't. And then it happened. The doorknob twisted slowly, with an eerie, metallic creak. It opened, revealing not a poised model or a high-end executive assistant, but a girl who looked like she'd just walked through a hurricane. Hair in chaos, blouse stained with coffee, skirt torn at the hem, one broken, heel clicking against the hardwood floor like a last breath. She was soaked, muddy, and pale, but her eyes were defiant, alive. She looked like she had walked out of a battlefield and had no intention of apologizing for it. "I'm here for the interview," she said, voice trembling but proud. Ryan choked. Ethan froze. She wasn't what anyone expected. She was everything Ethan didn't plan for. Her name was Emily Harper. She wasn't rich, she wasn't polished, she wasn't prepared. But behind the mess was a fire Ethan hadn't seen in years, a spark that wasn't taught in finishing schools or showcased on dating apps. Emily wasn't here for love, she was here for survival. And that's exactly what Ethan needed. You see, this isn't just a story about romance. This is a story about pressure, about identity, about the kind of fear successful people never talk about, the fear of not being enough when it counts the most. The fear of your whole legacy collapsing because of one missing piece you thought was irrelevant until it wasn't. And maybe, just maybe, this strange, coffee-stained woman was the missing piece. The question was, would she say yes, would you? If this moment hooked you, if the idea of two strangers caught in a web of lies, pain, and unexpected connection makes your heart beat a little faster, then you haven't seen anything yet. Because what comes next will challenge what you believe about loyalty, ambition, love, and the true cost of pretending. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps us going and the stories coming. If this resonated with you, it only gets better from here. Now, I'll leave you with a question. What matters more when everything's on the line? Of protecting the truth, no matter the cost. B. Protecting the outcome, even if it means lying. Comment or be below. I want to know what you believe because soon, Ethan will have to make that very choice, and trust me, it won't be easy. Ethan Carter had always been a man who operated with precision. Spreadsheets, quarterly reports, global fashion forecasts, those were the languages he spoke fluently. But as he sat across from Emily Harper in the quiet stillness of his office, a young woman with a resume that barely filled a single page and clothes that looked like they had lost a war, he realized he was about to enter a kind of negotiation no MBA could have prepared him for. This wasn't a deal between two companies. This was a deal between two people at the edge of their limits. Emily sat with her hands folded in her lap, her eyes darting between Ethan and the large office windows that looked out over the city. Her appearance was chaotic, but there was a steadiness in her voice. She didn't ask for pity, didn't beg for opportunity. She was here because she had nowhere else to go, and she didn't pretend otherwise. And in that moment, Ethan saw something far more valuable than polish. He saw grit and guard. Did he need someone with grit? Because tomorrow, Haruto Takeda, the Japanese mogul who held the future of Lumina in his hands, was expecting to meet Ethan's fiancée. Not a secretary, not a contractor, a woman who looked the part, acted the part, and would sell the illusion of a loving, committed relationship. And not just to Haruto, but to his wife and children, who valued family the way some people worshipped religion. Ethan didn't have time, he didn't have options. What he had was a desperate idea and a woman who had just spilled her entire morning, and perhaps her dignity, on the lobby floor. "You're not here for this," he said finally, his voice low. "But I think you might be the only person who can help me." Emily tilted her head. "Help you how?" He paused, then leaned forward. "I need you to pretend to be my fiancée." Silence. It was the kind of silence that had weight, texture, a pressure that pushed against the walls of the room. Emily didn't flinch, her brow furrowed, not in horror, but in calculation. "For how long?" she asked, her voice calm but wary. 2 weeks, maybe 3, Ethan replied. "Until the Takeda deal closes." She blinked. "That's not a job offer. That's theatre." "It's survival," he said. She sat back, considering. "So you want me to lie?" He nodded. "Yes. But you won't be lying for free." He scribbled a number on a slip of paper and slid it across the desk. Emily picked it up, her hand trembling slightly. When she saw the figure, she let out a low breath. "This ... is a down payment," she whispered. "It'll cover the damage to your apartment, your brother's tuition, and a few months' worth of security," he said. "More to come after we finish the act." Emily's face flushed. She set the paper down and looked at him squarely. "This isn't for anything ... physical, is it?" Ethan let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "No, I need a partner, not a mistress. I need someone who can look like she loves me in front of a man who can smell lies from across a room." Emily looked down at her skirt, absently smoothing out the wrinkles, as if she could iron her life into something neater. Ethan could see her thinking not like someone weighing greed against risk, but like someone who had made every hard decision on her own since she was too young to be making any. "My little brother," she said, her voice suddenly softer. "He's only 7. If I take this, he comes with me." "Of course," Ethan said. Emily took a breath. Then, with a surprising steadiness, she stood and extended her hand. "Deal." Her fingers were cold, her grip unsure, but something passed between them in that handshake, not affection, not trust, but the recognition of two people who were out of lifelines, building a lifeboat out of desperation. That afternoon, they began preparing for the biggest performance of their lives. Emily would move into Ethan's guest house. They would rehearse their story, how they met, how they fell in love, what songs they danced to. There were details to invent, timelines to construct, habits to pretend had always been there. They practiced smiles in mirrors, nicknames in passing. They discussed childhoods, invented fake memories, and tried to fold their broken pieces into something that resembled a shared history. Ethan watched her memorize lines like she'd done it before, and maybe she had, just not for the stage. Maybe surviving poverty, grief, and bureaucracy had trained her for this farce better than any actress could ever hope. At one point, as she recited a story about their first date over takeout noodles, Ethan asked, "Why are you so calm about this?" She didn't look up from her container, because panic doesn't pay the rent. That night, Ethan drove her to pick up Liam. The boy ran into her arms with the kind of innocence only a child untouched by the weight of adult failure could still carry. Ethan stood in the background, watching Emily transform not into a socialite or a bride-to-be, but into a mother figure who held the world together with tired arms and a fragile smile. He didn't see desperation anymore, he saw resilience. Later, after they moved into the mansion, after Liam had explored every hallway like a pirate ship, Ethan found himself alone in the kitchen with Emily. She was barefoot, quietly washing a mug. "You're not what I expected," he said. She didn't look at him. "Neither are you?" There was no romance yet, no spark, just the quiet recognition that they were about to enter something neither of them fully understood but both needed more than they dared admit. Ethan Carter thought he was hiring a fake fiancé, but what he got was something far more dangerous. A real connection, and nothing ruins a business deal faster than a heart you can't control. There's something about pretending to be a family that begins to feel real far sooner than you expect, especially when no one else is pretending. For Ethan Carter, the days that followed his fake engagement to Emily Harper were meant to be a calculated act, a polished lie designed to earn the trust of Haruto Takeda. Ethan had anticipated strategic dinners, staged glances, and rehearsed laughter. What he hadn't planned for was how easily those things stopped feeling staged. What he hadn't planned for was waking up each morning in a house that no longer echoed with emptiness, but with the sounds of life. A child's footsteps pounding down the hallway, the quiet hum of a woman boiling tea, the subtle murmur of warmth that only a home, not a house, could carry. Emily adjusted quickly. She moved through Ethan's sleek, modern estate with an instinct for where things belonged. It wasn't elegance that made her fit, it was ease. She didn't try to impress anyone, least of all Ethan. She was simply present. She remembered his coffee order. She reminded him to take a jacket when the forecast called for rain. She left small post-it notes on the fridge when she finished the last of the milk. Nothing grand, just small things, and somehow it was the small things that unraveled Ethan the most. And then there was Liam. That boy had no idea he was part of a performance. He adored Ethan with the unfiltered openness only children are brave enough to offer. He peppered him with questions at breakfast, dragged him into soccer games in the backyard, and once proudly handed him a crayon drawing of the three of them labeled me, Mom, and Mr. Theo. Ethan stared at that piece of paper for a long time. He told himself this wasn't dangerous, that everything they were doing was still part of the script. But the more time he spent with Emily and Liam, the more that script blurred, smudged by moments too spontaneous to be rehearsed. Like the night they cooked dinner for the Takeda family. Amanda, her hands flour-dusted and hair pinned up, had taken control of Ethan's gourmet kitchen with the commanding presence of someone used to managing chaos. She assigned duties with calm authority, Haruto on vegetables, Aiko on tea, Ethan on setting the table. It should have felt absurd, borderline unprofessional. Instead, it felt warm, real. Haruto and Aiko didn't just play along, they loved it. Haruto even said it reminded him of his childhood in America before everything had become tailored and ceremonial. After dinner, they played charades. Ethan hadn't laughed like that in years. At one point, Emily was supposed to act out The Little Mermaid, and instead of miming gracefully, she flailed around the room with seaweed-shaped napkins, causing Liam to burst into hysterical giggles. Haruto's wife wiped tears from her eyes, breathless with laughter. Later that night, when the guests were gone and the dishes were cleared, Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, heart racing in a way he hadn't felt since his 20s. It wasn't about nerves, it was longing, not for physical closeness, but for the rhythm they had unknowingly created. Morning pancakes, shared glances over dinner, Liam's bedtime stories. He missed them before they were even gone, and yet he said nothing. He kept his distance because he knew better. Because he had seen what happened when lines blurred. Because Amanda had her own life, her own pain, and Ethan, despite the suits and status, didn't want to become another man who used a woman's circumstances for his benefit. But it wasn't just Ethan who changed. Amanda, too, began to soften. Her guard, once armored by years of loss and exhaustion, slowly lowered around Ethan. She started laughing more easily. Sometimes she would stop in the hallway just to listen to Liam's laughter from the next room, her eyes wet with the kind of quiet grief only someone who's carried too much too long can understand. Ethan noticed these moments not because they were romantic, but because they were human, raw, unmasked. And then came the night they went to the ballet. Haruto had insisted. "It will remind you what beauty really is," he'd said. Amanda wore a simple black dress, nothing showy, nothing extravagant, but Ethan had to catch his breath when he saw her. Not because she was suddenly transformed, but because, for the first time, he realized how little it would take to fall for someone who didn't pretend to be perfect. During the performance, Ethan barely looked at the stage. He watched Amanda instead, her eyes wide, lips parted in wonder, hands clasped tightly in her lap. At one point, Haruto leaned over and whispered with a grin, "You're missing the show." "No," Ethan replied, barely audible, "I'm not." It would have been easier if they had hated each other, or if Amanda had been difficult, or if Liam had been aloof. But the truth was, they made it easy, too easy, and that was the danger. The more they pretended, the more Ethan realized that some things couldn't be faked, like the way Liam clung to Amanda when he was scared during a thunderstorm. Like the way Amanda absent-mindedly reached for Ethan's hand when they crossed the street. Like the way Ethan, against all logic, began to wake up early just to make them breakfast. They had created something together not just for the benefit of a business deal, but for each other. And though neither of them dared speak it aloud, the thought hung in the air between them like a secret only the house knew. A family that wasn't real but felt truer than anything either of them had known. Ethan told himself it was still a performance, but deep down he understood the truth. He was no longer afraid that the Takeda deal would fall apart. He was afraid that when it ended, when the curtain finally came down, so would this quiet, accidental version of a life he'd never thought he wanted, but now couldn't bear to lose. It started with a glance, a brief, sharp flicker of suspicion in Haruto Takeda's eyes during their final dinner together. Ethan Carter saw it, felt it like a sudden chill. For weeks, everything had gone almost too well. The performances were seamless, the story airtight, and the warmth between him and Emily had begun to feel so genuine, so dangerously real, that even he had started to believe in it. But in that one glance, Ethan sensed the illusion had started to crack. And once a crack appears in something carefully constructed, it doesn't take much for the whole thing to collapse. Haruto had always been a man of subtlety. He never raised his voice, never made accusations. But that night, between bites of miso black cod and polite conversation, he asked one question so soft it almost felt like an afterthought. "Emily, you said you met Ethan in Boston. What year was that again?" Emily hesitated, just slightly. A pause that might have gone unnoticed by anyone else, but not Haruto. 2 years ago, she answered, forcing a smile, at a gallery opening. Ethan's heart sank. It was the wrong answer. They had agreed on 3 years ago at a charity event. A small slip, but in Haruto's world, details were everything. Haruto nodded politely, said nothing, and changed the subject, but the damage was done. The next morning, Ethan's assistant called. Haruto had pulled out of the deal, no explanation, no farewell. Just a silence that confirmed what Ethan feared most. He had been found out. The fallout came fast and brutal. Investors pulled their interest. Partners demanded explanations. The media smelled blood and went after Ethan's reputation with the kind of savagery reserved for the powerful. The board, who had once praised his innovation and vision, now treated him like a liability. Within 48 hours, he went from the golden boy of fashion tech to a man standing in the ruins of his own empire. But the collapse of Lumina was nothing compared to what happened at home. Emily stood in the doorway of his study, arms crossed, her eyes already red from crying. The house once alive with Liam's laughter, quiet dinners, and unsaid affection felt hollow. Ethan looked up at her, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. "I'm sorry," she said at last. "I ruined everything." "No," Ethan said, standing. "I did. I dragged you into this, you and Liam. You never asked for any of it." But I agreed to it, she whispered. I said yes, I knew the risks. He moved closer, the distance between them thick with the weight of all they hadn't said. You did it to survive, I did it to win. That's the difference. Emily's lips trembled. So, what now? Ethan didn't have an answer. He wanted to say he'd fix it, that he'd somehow rebuild everything. But for the first time in years, he didn't know how. His certainty, his power, his carefully crafted identity, they had all been illusions. And the only thing that had ever been real in this entire charade was standing in front of him with a breaking heart and a child upstairs who thought Ethan was his hero. I think you should go, he finally said, the words barely escaping his throat. Emily flinched. Go, he nodded, eyes stinging. Before this house collapses around us both. You deserve better than to be dragged down with me. It was cowardice, and he knew it, but it was also protection. Ethan didn't want Emily to watch him unravel, to witness the full extent of what failure looked like on the man who had once promised her nothing and still gave her everything she didn't know she needed. She left the next morning, no dramatic goodbye. Just a quiet closing of the door, the echo of small footsteps, and a silence that swallowed the walls whole. And just like that, Ethan was alone again. But this time, the loneliness was unbearable. He walked through the halls like a ghost, touching the places where life had bloomed for a brief, beautiful season. The kitchen, where Emily laughed, the staircase, where Liam had fallen asleep in his arms, the garden, where he had watched them chase fireflies under the moonlight, pretending not to feel the ache of wanting something he couldn't name. He thought about calling her. He picked up the phone 100 times. But what would he say? I miss you wasn't enough. I was wrong, felt too late. And so he said nothing. Days passed, then weeks. And one afternoon, as he sat in the quiet of his office, a letter arrived. No name on the envelope, just his address in delicate handwriting. Inside was a drawing Liam's. Clearly, it showed 3 stick figures again. Only this time, they were standing farther apart. One on the left, one in the middle, one on the right. But in the corner, written in a child's block letters, was one word, still a family. Still thinking of you, still waiting. Ethan's hands trembled as he held the paper. In that moment, the collapse stopped feeling like the end. It started feeling like the beginning of something else. Something he hadn't earned, but maybe, just maybe, could still try to. Some stories don't end in fairy tales, some end in silence, in distance, in letters written by children who still believe. But if there's anything I've learned after years of watching people fall in and out of love, lose everything, and still find a way forward, it's this: real redemption doesn't come from fixing what's broken. It comes from becoming someone who would never break it again. Ethan Carter didn't rebuild his empire. At least, not right away. He stopped trying to win back investors, stopped chasing headlines. The man who once lived in boardrooms and private jets now walked to a local diner each morning, took his coffee black, and read books he never had time for. He volunteered at a youth centre on weekends, helping kids like Liam who didn't have steady fathers or safe homes. He told no one who he used to be, and strangely, no one asked. Months passed. Winter melted into spring. The silence in his house softened from unbearable to familiar. The space Emily and Liam had left behind still echoed in every room, but it no longer haunted him. It reminded him of what mattered, of who he had been when they were near. One evening, while sorting old mail he had ignored for weeks, Ethan found a postcard. It was simple, a photo of a beach in San Diego, with writing on the back in neat, slanted handwriting. I thought you might like this view. Liam starts school next month. He still talks about you. Hope you're well, E. He held the card to his chest for a long time. And for the first time since they left, he allowed himself to hope. 3 days later, he boarded a plane. He didn't call first. He didn't send a message, he just showed up. It was a small bungalow near the ocean, nothing fancy. Paint peeling slightly from the porch. A swing hung from the old oak tree out front, and a blue bike was tipped over in the grass. He stood there for a full minute, unsure of what to do. Then the door opened. Emily froze when she saw him. No makeup, hair pulled back, a worn hoodie over leggings. She looked tired and beautiful. Neither spoke at first. Then Ethan, voice raw and low, said the only words that truly mattered. "I miss you." Emily's eyes welled up, but she didn't look away. "Why now?" "Because I had to lose everything," he said, "to understand what it meant to have you." She stepped outside, closing the door behind her. "It wasn't about the money, Ethan. It was never about the business." "I know," he nodded. "That's why it broke us. Because I made it about that. I made everything about control and image and winning. But you weren't a strategy. You were my heart, and I never treated you that way." Emily studied him. He looked different, not just older, but softer, quieter, like someone who had finally let go of the man he used to be. "I never wanted perfection," she said, "just honesty. Just someone who saw me not as a tool, or a fix, or a risk, but as a person." "I see you now," Ethan whispered. "I see what we were, what we could be, if you'd let me. I'd like to try again. Not from the beginning, from the truth." The door creaked open again, and a small figure ran out. "Mr. Theo," Liam barreled into Ethan's arms, nearly knocking him over. Ethan scooped him up, burying his face in the boy's hair. He didn't realize he was crying until he felt Emily's hand gently rest on his back. They sat on the porch for hours after that, talking, not just about the past, but about what came next. Ethan didn't make promises this time. He didn't offer plans or guarantees. He simply asked for time, for presence, for the chance to become a man worthy of the family he had nearly lost. Over the weeks that followed, he kept showing up. School pickups, grocery runs, Sunday dinners. He mowed the lawn, repaired the leaky faucet, helped Liam with homework, not because he had to but because he wanted to. Because it grounded him, gave his days meaning, taught him that love wasn't grand gestures or lavish gifts, it was consistency. Quiet, daily effort, and slowly, something shifted. Emily laughed more. Liam asked to call him Dad. Ethan found himself building a life that didn't need validation from the outside world. One morning, as they walked the beach together, Emily took his hand. "Do you still feel like you're pretending?" she asked. Ethan squeezed her fingers. "No, for the first time, I feel like I'm finally living." They didn't rush into anything formal. There were no rings, no staged declarations. But one day, months later, Liam came home with a school assignment titled "My Family" in it. He wrote, "My mom is the kindest person I know. My dad used to be someone else, but now he's the best version of himself. We're not perfect, but we're real, and that was enough." Redemption doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. It knocks quietly on a door you once closed. It waits. And if you're brave enough to answer, not with apologies, but with action, it will meet you there, barefoot on a porch, with forgiveness in its eyes and a second chance in its hands. There comes a time in every person's life when they must face the uncomfortable truth. Love isn't always lost in one grand betrayal, but in the tiny moments we take each other for granted. In the story of Ethan, Emily, and Liam, we witness the painful unraveling of a life built on appearances and the slow, humbling path back to something real. But more than a tale of heartbreak and reconciliation, this is a story about transformation, about the courage to let go of who we were in order to become who we're meant to be. Ethan's redemption wasn't just about getting his family back, it was about unlearning everything he once believed defined success. For years, he measured his worth in stock prices and business wins. He thought he could fix anything with money, control, or cleverness. But when the people he loved most slipped through his fingers, he was forced to confront a truth that too many of us ignore: emotional absence cannot be compensated by material presence. It wasn't the grand gestures that brought healing. It was the quiet, consistent acts: picking Liam up from school, fixing a leaky faucet, being present at the dinner table. These small, humble choices whispered something powerful to Emily and Liam. "You matter, I see you. I'm here." And in a world so busy chasing the next big thing, those simple acts of presence have become rare, precious currency. This story reminds us that no matter how far we've fallen, there is always a way back if we are willing to take responsibility without excuse, to show up without fanfare, and to love without condition. So what is the deep lesson here, and how can we apply it to our lives? It's this: love doesn't thrive in perfection, it thrives in authenticity. We often wait until it's too late, until someone leaves or something breaks, to start acting like the version of ourselves we always wished we were. But we don't need tragedy to grow. We can choose today to begin showing up more deeply in our relationships. Ask yourself, have I truly listened to the people I love this week? Have I been emotionally present, not just physically nearby? Am I willing to put in the work without expecting immediate rewards? Start with one act, one small gesture. Apologize, say thank you more. Look your partner in the eyes when they speak. Put down the phone. These aren't revolutionary moves, but they are powerful because they tell the people around you, you are safe with me. Redemption isn't just for broken marriages. It's for all of us who've drifted, grown numb, or forgotten how to love with our whole hearts. It's a daily invitation to return, not to what was, but to what can be. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Here's a simple question for you. Which do you believe builds stronger relationships in the long run? At grand romantic gestures and surprises? Be consistent, everyday emotional presence. Please share your answer by commenting or be below. Your thoughts might help someone else who's silently struggling. Let's learn from each other. And if you found this story meaningful, please subscribe to the channel to support the creation of more heartfelt, reflective content like this. If you feel moved and want to contribute, even a small donation means the world. It keeps this work alive and helps an old soul like me continue sharing what I've learned through life. I may be growing older, but this mission to offer something good, something real to the world keeps my heart young. Your support, whether through a like, a kind comment, or a small gift, gives me the strength to keep going. Thank you for listening.